What's going on, everybody? We're back. This is Blake&VishSports, Sports, episode 31, and we're here to recap the draft in a different type of way, and we're here to talk about a lot of different things. But the draft went on this weekend, Blake, but you got a bombshell of news this Thursday.
Oh, yeah.
And so we got to start there, Blake. How do you feel as a Packers fan about your draft and the bombshell of news that we're going to be talking about in the next 2 minutes?
Yeah, so the draft, as a Packers fan, I was overall pretty satisfied with it. Their top picks, cornerback, O-line a lot. Amari Rodgers, they drafted the next A. Rodgers, so we'll for sure have one on the team next year, guaranteed, which is always promising. So, yeah, I really did like the draft for the Packers. Oh, just overall, there's a couple spots where I wish we could have got this guy or that guy, but end of day, I was pretty happy. And I think, I don't know if we talked about it, but you thought it was all right too, for the most part, right?
Yeah, I thought the Packers had a solid draft. I thought the Niners also had a solid draft. I hate the post-draft evaluation of this was a good pick, this was a bad pick. No one actually knows. For the most part, if you get like players that fill a role for your team that makes sense, not drafting A.J. Dillon and Jordan Love, drafting players that make sense based on a need, I think it's always a good draft until we see it play out. So let's get out of this draft and let's get into the big news. Blake, you're a Packers fan.
Yeah.
And it looks like Aaron Rodgers wants out. It looks like he wants Brian Gutekunst out. It looked like there was a time on Thursday that he might have become a 49er. Talk to me about this entire Packers situation.
Yeah. All right. So let's just start from the origins of this. So we're going to talk about how this all came up. So the Packers traded up in last year's draft, 2020 draft, for Jordan Love. Now, they didn't tell him about this, so that was kind of a surprise. Even with the Bears told Andy Dalton that they were trading up for Fields, but they did not tell Rodgers about this. And then into this offseason, he wanted an extension, and they didn't want to extend him. Maybe due to age, maybe due to the Jordan Love pick. Don't know. And then the day of the draft, Thursday, this report comes out that Aaron Rodgers is done with the team. He's simply not coming back. The 49ers offered a king's ransom for him, the number 3 pick, and then future picks and players, Jimmy Garoppolo included. So he also said he thought he was gone. He thought, he thought he was going to be a 49er. And he said he told them to take the trade. They didn't. Obviously, he's still on the team. And now he has a wish list of the 49ers, Raiders, and Broncos. And then this is where it really got crazy, I think, is when there started becoming reports that the Denver Broncos the deal is just about as close to being done as it can be. Like, this is in the works. He's gone soon. Watch out for this trade during the draft. And then there was following reports saying that they never discussed a trade with the Packers and that they were just focused on the draft this whole time. So you see that, you literally see, one side of the spectrum to the complete other side, and you're like, okay, that's crazy. And Mike, this is a quote from Mike Tirico. So he actually talked with Rodgers, and Rodgers was saying how he's a little upset with the rift that was going on. He apparently didn't want this to all be public. Although it seems to be like it kind of came from his camp almost. Or maybe it was just media clicks from Rob Demovsky, who is the main Packers reporter. And he basically, to summarize the quote, he said, he never wished this went public. He expressed that he loves the fans, franchise, and city. And then Demovsky has said that Aaron Rodgers, there's a less than 5% chance he plays for the Packers this upcoming season, and that Rodgers has told multiple teammates that he does not want to, that he's not coming back, basically. So that's crazy. And then here's from the other side. This is what Rodgers said 3 months ago. Sorry. Just going to summarize the quote here. I don't think there's any reason why I wouldn't be back in Green Bay. And then also when talking to Pat McAfee, he said that he is at peace with the whole Jordan Love situation. Okay, so that is like just everything basically. And so here's my takeaway. I think it's a little overblown from the media, just generating clicks. Particularly with the whole Denver thing, the fact that some people are saying the deal's almost done and other people saying they haven't discussed a deal is like, how do you possibly have those two statements? I don't get that, but I do think there is definitely a tension, obviously, between Rodgers and the front office with the extension, with the Jordan Love situation, and then with them also just like not committing to him for the future. So yeah, that's my everything. I've kind of rambled here, and I don't think he'll get traded. They've declined trade offers, so I really just do not think that will happen. Especially due to the cap hit. If they trade him before June 1st, there's like over $30 million dead cap hit. So like, why would they ever even consider doing that? I don't think they would. And then there's
Go ahead.
Just one last thing. I know I've been going on for a bit, but there's another thing saying Rodgers said it's either him or the team has to decide to stick with him or GM Brian Gutekunst. And it's like, that's the ultimatum. And I'm like, okay, if that is true, that's pretty crazy. So yeah, I think it's at the end of the day, there's a tension there that's clearly evident to the extent I don't think the media really knows. That's bottom line.
You don't think the media knows. And your prediction and your gut feeling on Rodgers, whether he gets moved or not this offseason.
Yeah, I don't think they know whether he's actually getting traded or not. I don't think he will be traded. It would have to be post June 1st, like I mentioned, and there even in the next few years there'd be cap hit for him. So it just doesn't make sense that they would do that. So I do think there's a tension. I don't think he's going to get traded though. They've declined trade offers for him. I mean, including the third pick. Like if they really wanted to get him off their hands and the third pick's at play, like think, okay, I'd take it.
So from what I understand, reading about the situation, that nobody has been able to even make an official offer. They keep turning down calls. So if anybody calls about Rodgers, they don't even let them make an offer. They just say, nope, he's not on the table. So do you think that the Packers eventually fold? Because they're in a tough spot because it looks like Rodgers is thinking about possibly retiring and just going into his Jeopardy career.
No, the Jeopardy thing too is like, he's had a great time with Jeopardy. He's stepped away from the game a little bit and is like, I'm getting paid a lot of money to just host Jeopardy. Like this is a pretty good gig and I don't blame him. Like that sounds awesome. But I do think he will play this upcoming season from what we've gathered so far. The team is definitely not going to trade him from what it sounds like. They said they think he's going to be here. There was a presser and a lot of the questions were about that. And I think the front office did a really good job of like handling those questions candidly and, providing good responses back. So, attention's there. I do think he'll play this upcoming season. I really hope he doesn't retire. That'd be a bummer. I really hope he doesn't get released or traded. But yeah, I think this probably his last year is my thoughts. Do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, so
what is your perspective from an outside the Packers?
There's a lot to unwrap here. You kind of covered the basis of why they're beefing and all of that. It's very clear that he's still ticked off about them drafting Jordan Love, as he should be. It wasn't the same as the Packers drafting Aaron Rodgers with Brett Favre. Aaron Rodgers was projected as a top 5 pick in that draft, and he fell to the Packers. Jordan Love was projected as a bottom 12 of the first round pick.
Yeah.
And the Packers went up and traded to get him. That's a little different. So that's one thing where I say Aaron Rodgers has 100%, his anger, his him being upset in this situation, in my opinion, is 100% valid. In regards to the tension and whether he plays, I'm with you. I just think the Packers will ensure that they won't trade him. I think, look at Seattle and Russell Wilson, right? That beef was steaming high. People thought Russell Wilson was going to get traded for sure. They said Chicago was right there, ready to make a trade. And now people are saying that the beef between Russell Wilson and the Seahawks has subsided and they're ready to go for next year. I think something similar could happen to the Green Bay Packers. I think the other angle is that I think Rodgers just being I think he's a little more salty of a human being. I think that he kind of wanted to stick it to the Packers. I just want MVP. You did this to me last year on draft night, so I'm going to do the same thing to you and see how you react. So I think there's a little bit of that going on. Ultimately, do I think Rodgers finishes his career with the Packers? Absolutely not. The writing's on the wall, and it's been on the wall since they drafted Jordan Love. I do think he stays this year, and I think because I think teams will be prepping to try and take on the money that he's getting paid in 2022, and the Packers need a year to kind of be flexible and shift money and make sure that they can unload him. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen. I don't think it's as black and white as Rodgers wants to trade so he can get out. I think that's part of it, but I think there's a lot more variables involved here. And I think that this year it's not going to happen, but 2022, man, it's going to be fun to see you with Jordan Love on the field and, finally not having a Hall of Fame quarterback and knowing what it's like, what other fandoms have to suffer right through.
There. But yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I didn't even mention, I talked for like 5 minutes, so obviously I forgot something. But the Seattle Seahawks thing with Russell Wilson, I wanted to bring that up too. There was tons of stuff about how, the Bears they're definitely going to get him. The odds for the trade, they were taking them off betting sites. The Bears Super Bowl odds were shooting up, making you believe that it'll actually happen. And then you've come to find out that it really was not that close to happening. And when you look at the dead cap hit, like a team's not just going to eat $30 million and just waste the season pretty much and not compete at all. Like that would just be crazy to do. And that's what would happen. And now that I think, most of the teams have either drafted their quarterback, like the Niners. Do you think the Niners would still trade for him? Because they would have to get rid of Trey Lance at this point, and they just took him 3. Now the Broncos didn't draft a quarterback, so I think he would probably that's still the place. I think if he were to go, would be there. Is that in the fact that they still don't have a quarterback?
So selfishly, like to me, even I'm sorry, like Trey Lance, ton of potential. Whoever they drafted, whether it was Trey Lance, outside of Trevor Lawrence, whoever they drafted, I'm ready to ship them off, even if it means only 3 years of Aaron Rodgers, because I believe so much in Aaron Rodgers and Kyle Shanahan together that I believe that they would win two out of 4, 2 out of 3 Super Bowls. I think they're that good, and Rodgers is still playing at a high level, and the level Rodgers is currently playing at right now, I don't expect if Trey Lance has a 48 touchdown, 5 interception season at any point in his career, the Niners hit beyond gold, because that's one of the great quarterback seasons in NFL history. So for me, it's a no-brainer if Rodgers is available. I just think the Green Bay Packers, no way, no how, would trade Aaron Rodgers to the 49ers. There's no way Matt LaFleur would give Aaron Rodgers to Kyle Shanahan. So that's where I think Denver comes into play, and a lot of people said Denver's the most interested. I think Denver makes a lot of sense if you look at their weapons. If you look at their team, they've got a really, really talented defense for next year. I don't think people realize how much talent's on that defense, especially when you add Patrick Surtain. That is probably the first or second best secondary in the NFL. So I think Denver makes a lot of sense. We'll see if Denver actually ends up pulling the trigger. But I think ultimately, if I had to guess based on the teams that are interested, I think Denver is the team to look out for. And they're in a division with Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes. So however good Drew Lock becomes, however good you think Drew Lock could become, whatever, he's never – I don't think we could say he's never – I think we can say he's never going to be either of those two guys. So you need a quarterback that can look those guys in the eye and win that division for you, and that's where Rodgers comes into play.
Yeah. Definitely. And yeah, along with that too, that division is just loaded with quarterbacks. If they get Rodgers, the worst quarterback in that division would be Derek Carr, which is
a top 15 quarterback.
Actually insane. It's insane. I mean, you really have, I don't think I can remember a time, maybe this past year with just the names in the NFC South, Matt Ryan, Breeze, and Brady, but those guys were all way older than these guys. So it's crazy.
Maybe 15 with MVP Cam, basically still 40 touchdown, 10 interception Drew Brees, and 30 touchdown, 10 interception Matt Ryan. Maybe that's the closest. But, man, it would be arguably the greatest quarterback division of all time, because I think when you look at what the teams are doing, Kansas City just had a hell of a draft. Their offensive line went from the worst in the NFL to now they have a top 10 offensive line with the addition of Zeus Brown, Joe Tooney, and Creed Humphrey, who I thought was a good pick. And the Chargers just continue. Tom Telesco is one of the best drafters in the NFL, and I thought they had a great draft in terms of getting Rashawn Slater, and they had a good free agency getting Corey Linsley, so they put talent around Justin Herbert. And then you look at the Raiders. The Raiders.
They're kind of the
right. But yeah, so I mean, you look at the talent around these quarterbacks. I think the ultimate thing is that like in order for the Broncos to win, they need a guy like Aaron Rodgers.
Yep, I'm totally with you.
Yeah.
So this whole thing's crazy. I think we can go to the bottom line here. I think he's gone after this season. I do think he'll play. And guys, the media has been wrong a ton of times. Like this whole Mac Jones to the Niners thing. There's that. There's this Russell Wilson. He's gone. Well, that didn't happen. I do think there's tension. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, Aaron Rodgers, this is all, rainbows and butterflies, but it's definitely a lot worse than I think some people saying he's gone today,
Look, and I think that's the point, right? The timing. You have to look at the other variables just besides the reporting, the timing of this, right? He has to be moved post June 1st. So basically what you're kind of left with is that for this year for the Packers and for this year for Aaron Rodgers, it might be just best to stick it out one more year, try and win a Super Bowl. The Packers roster is a little better, I would say, this year than it was last year. Actually, a decent amount better. I thought they've gotten better through the free agency and the draft. Amari Rodgers brings a Randall Cobb type element back to this offense.
Great comparison.
So I think that it's going to be best for him to try to win it this year. He likes his teammates, obviously. He likes to be beloved in Green Bay. And then for both of them, it would make sense to move on. Because this year, with the money and all of that, it's the same thing as the Russell Wilson situation. He might want out. Seattle might be ready to trade him. Teams might be willing to trade. But just everything has to make sense. And I don't think it makes sense.
And then one more thing with that. If he were to leave, do you think the Raiders or the Broncos are even in remotely the same condition, like team structure-wise, as the Packers? Because I would say no chance.
I think the Broncos are a better team in terms of roster outside of the quarterback. I think the Broncos are better.
I would say the offense isn't close. Like the O-line's not comparable. Packers is way, way better.
Yeah, but I would say the weapons
is better. Our running backs are probably better. And our receivers are
maybe.
And our receivers are just as good too.
They're not just as good.
Devontae Adams is the best out of the bunch, but Broncos have.
But you go Noah Fant, Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, KJ Hamler, Tim Patrick, who I know you love, and then you throw in the fact that they drafted Javonte Williams. Melvin Gordon has been looked at as a top 10 running back at times in his career. Garrett Bowles is no slouch in their offensive line.
Yeah, but the rest of their line is not anything.
You are riding on the assumption that the Packers line is going to continue to just find middle and late round gems and play them, because they did lose Corey Linsley.
I mean, they did. Yeah, I mean, they did. They develop. I still think their line will be better than the Broncos. Running backs is debatable. I think you're right on receivers. The Broncos have a ton of awesome receivers.
And then defense, come on. Defense is here.
Yeah, their defense is better. But would you rather have LaFleur calling the plays or the Broncos OC?
Shermer?
Yeah.
I mean, if I could just get Rodgers to the line of scrimmage with those weapons, I mean, McCarthy can be successful with that. So why can't Pat Shermer? He succeeded with Case Keenum.
I mean, oh well. I'd rather have LaFleur probably, but
yes.
No straws here.
Yes, definitely. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you're right. LaFleur is definitely better. I just meant to go from the standpoint of like Aaron Rodgers makes such a difference.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So I wanted to we didn't talk about this topic, but I wanted to take this topic to you because I think this is a great segue from the Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson conversation that we had, that was primarily focused on Aaron Rodgers. And this goes back to when Rodgers first got angry. I shot out a tweet saying like, wow, look at how Brady's move to Tampa has affected the NFL. And I think it's the same effect that LeBron moving to Miami had on the NBA. Like Brady moving to Tampa, I think people originally looked at Brady in New England and said, wow, he has Belichick and he takes pay cuts. That's why he's winning. So we can keep staying in our place. But then you saw Brady go to Tampa Bay, not take a pay cut, and win a Super Bowl within 1 year, I think it's starting to affect these other quarterbacks. And I think that's why within one offseason, we've seen like 4 franchise quarterbacks ask out. Deshaun Watson and Matthew Stafford had different situations. But, I mean, you look at Aaron Rodgers, I would say there's some correlation to the fact that it goes beyond the Jordan Love stuff. He saw Brady go and win a Super Bowl in Tampa Bay. Russell Wilson, reporters have already tied to it on how angry he was watching the Super Bowl. And you look at LeBron going to Miami, right? LeBron going to Miami, then ripple affected KD to making the ultimate move and moving to Golden State. So from that standpoint, do you think that like Tom Brady's move to Tampa Bay is affecting the NFL like drastically?
I really do. I think it's mainly just quarterbacks seeing like, I have a ton of leverage, and they do. Tom had a really good situation. I don't think he could ask for much more than what was given to him. Maybe you could ask for better drafting the last few years, but overall, he played with Bill. He played for the Kraft family. Patriots organization wasn't much before he came there, but when Bill got there, those defenses have been really good his whole time there. They've surrounded him with Gronk, Aaron Hernandez, other good receivers. So that he had a lot. And then the last few years, he didn't really like it as much, wanted out. They drafted Jimmy Garoppolo in the 2nd round. And he just said, I mean, screw this. I'm not going to throw to injured Julian Edelman, Philip Dorsett, and Chris Hogan. I'm going to go to Tampa Bay. I'm going to throw to Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. I'm going to have a good old line. I'm going to have a super young, athletic, and just gutsy defense that'll play with heart. And he did that. And then they signed a bunch of guys for cheap contracts. Leonard Fournette. Hey, Gronk, come here. Come out of retirement. All right. He's out. He's there. They get LaShawn McCoy, who didn't do much. But, a bunch of people basically took pay cuts to go play there. And they ended up winning. And to relate this to LeBron, I feel like in the NBA, stars are more willing to just say, I want out. I don't need to play here anymore. There's no reason. I can go. I have leverage. I can go and play where I want. And you've seen this throughout the last few years of people just up and leaving. Paul George, for example, in OKC and in Indiana. He left both those
Jimmy
teams.
Butler.
Yep. And then also Kawhi Leonard. I don't want to play. Gets traded to Toronto, wins the championship, and still says, nope, I want to go to the Clippers. That's been my plan all along. Players are getting more and more leverage, I think, in both the NFL and NBA. And I see the ripple effect for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's actually a positive. I think that oftentimes, I get it from the fans' perspective. Like, you get tied to this quarterback and you want him to be the quarterback for your team. But I think you should actually, if you get upset with players moving, you should blame the media. It's the media's fault. The way they cover these players is wrong. We have conversations every single year about how long it's been since Aaron Rodgers won a Super Bowl. We have conversations every single year about why Aaron Rodgers' greatness isn't as great because he's unable to win Super Bowls. But we don't look at the variables of what teams he's taken to the NFC Championship game. Look at the team last year, right? We can go in and out in terms of LaFleur is a good play caller and they had a solid team. But in terms of you stack talent to talent against Tampa Bay, it was Rodgers, Aaron Jones, Devontae Adams, and a solid offensive line against a solid offensive line, Tom Brady, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, Rob Gronkowski, and then the defenses didn't compare. The Bucs defense was way faster. They were way better coached. They were way more physical. They were stronger. They were better in every department, essentially, than the Packers defense. So you look at stuff like that, but what does the media do? They blame Aaron Rodgers. And now Tom Brady is kind of given this license to the NFL. And this was a conversation I actually had for a small time with Grant 2 weeks ago 2 months ago, after the Bucs won the Super Bowl. I was like, you look at what's happening with Russell Wilson. I think more and more quarterbacks are going to start asking out and trying to get themselves to better situations. And Brady did that obviously after 6 Super Bowls. So if you look at people like Russell Wilson and Rodgers, whose legacies are still up in the air due to the fact that they've only won 1 Super Bowl, which we should be. It's a big achievement to win one Super Bowl, especially
it's hard
when
to do it. It really is.
and you've been a consistently great. They haven't been consistently good. They've been consistently great quarterbacks in the NFL. So you look at stuff like that, and people keep asking the question, well, are they good enough? They haven't won a Super Bowl. They're not that good because they haven't won a Super Bowl and all of that. It makes more sense to get yourself to the best possible situation. Like, sure, Russell Wilson, you and Aaron Rodgers both have blame, right? Like, Aaron Rodgers didn't play as well in, say, the 2015 NFC Championship game. That wasn't about talent against Seattle. That was that he didn't play well, and the team around him actually played pretty great prior to Brandon Bostic muffing the onside kick. Yeah. And you look at Russell Wilson, the offensive line problem. Sure, he runs himself into a lot of sacks. Sure, he doesn't play within the timing of the offense sometimes. But while those things are true, it doesn't mean that they can't get themselves into a better situation and have more success. Like, we just debated the Denver versus Green Bay debate, right? Like, if Rodgers goes to Denver, it's like Brady going to Tampa, because Denver's basically loaded at every spot, but they just have this giant question mark at quarterback.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I really think too is that with the media, I think it's more prevalent in NBA, and then with quarterbacks, like, you pin a narrative, this guy hasn't won a ring. How can we really know how great he is? He hasn't performed to the level of success. And I think a lot of that is why KD left. He's like, he just kept hearing the media say, oh, he's only won one ring. He hasn't won a ring. He's only been to the championship once. He just collapsed 3-1 against the Warriors. Like, is he really a great? And then he said, screw this. I'm going to go to the Warriors and win a bunch of rings. And he did exactly that. Now, his legacy is good and bad because of that, because a lot of people are like, well, he just joined, an already established organization that won 73 wins, while other people will point and say, well, he has his rings now. What's there to complain about? So it's a double-edged sword in that sense.
Right. But in my opinion, he always asks the right questions. He goes, because his legacy is not created by him. His legacy is created by people that write the story for his career, which is the media, and they have a lot of benefits to sports. So I'm not saying that. I mean, Blake and I are technically like the lowest form of media, because we're just kind of like opining about sports. But yeah, but the thing, in my opinion, that sets KD apart is that you're not evaluating his individual skill as a basketball player. You're looking at little scores within games and saying he's not good enough because of that. But are you telling me that KD isn't good enough because his game isn't good? Like, he can't handle the ball, or he can't pull up from three, or stuff like that. You can't really say that, because if you're just looking at talent and skill, KD is one of the 10 best players of all time. And that's where I think the same thing is going to start happening in the NFL, because the wins and losses, you put so much of that on the quarterback, right? I mean, you and I have been so adamant in saying that quarterbacks wins are not a quarterback stat. I'm so sick of seeing that stuff, but unfortunately it's getting put on the quarterback so much. I mean, Matthew Stafford, one of the most talented players in the NFL, huge arm, great ability, has been putting Detroit on his back for years. And people had the gall to question him and be like, well, Matthew Stafford has never won a playoff game, so why would you trade for him? Well, you don't win playoff games by yourself. Right. So I think it has to do with the way the sport is covered. I think a lot of that is what causes this type of agitation with athletes. And I think from that standpoint, if you don't want, I think that's where I'm pro athlete and go wherever you want. Because if you don't want that athlete to move, then we need to change the culture of how we speak about athletes and how we talk about their legacies, quote unquote, within a sport.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And the more quarterbacks get harped on for, oh, he only has one ring, oh, he lost this amount of playoff games, or like with Peyton Manning, a lot of say, look at how many times he was one and done. Well, look what he's been working with. I mean, he's done a great job, and he's one of the greatest quarterbacks ever, yet people slander him because he's lost in the playoffs. It's pretty crazy. And yeah, the more you tie, I think, quarterback wins to a quarterback, that's when it starts making quarterbacks say, all right, I'm done with this situation. I'm surrounded by not the best organization. Why don't I just go somewhere else, improve my situation? Like, why do I have to remain loyal to this team when they can't provide for me what, say, Tampa just did for Tom? Or, you can think of a ton of other examples. But I think even with you, and you've experienced this, is the whole Jimmy G thing. And a lot of people tie wins with the Niners to his legacy and why we should hold on, or why they should hold on to him, where it looks like the organization just said, we see Trey Lance here and we like him a lot. Why don't we just go up and get our guy? He may not have the same amount of wins as Jimmy or the same winning percentage when he's healthy, but we think he gives us a better chance to win.
That's the irony, right? Because Jimmy G's 2019 season, in terms of them going 13-3 and basically dominating the league and being right there to win the Super Bowl, I hate to say it, but there is a small chance in Trey Lance's career, even if he turns out to be a really good quarterback, just certain things go right and he never has a 13-3 season where they go to the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't make Jimmy G better than Trey Lance, especially when you just look at the individual ability and skill. And that's why, in my opinion, you always have to look at the quarterback away from his surrounding. Look at Goff. Goff is 3 out of the last 4 years made the playoffs. He always has a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He's always right there near 4,000 yards. His EPA and all the higher level efficiency stats, which actually measure the efficiency of the offense rather than the quarterback, all look great and all of that. But look, the Rams just dumped Goff. So that should tell you all you need to know about what people, at least the Rams, felt about wins and quarterback stats. And I think that if you look at going back to this situation with Tom Brady and him moving to the Bucs and LeBron moving to Miami, and you look at that again, if you don't want athletes to move, well, first of all, they should be allowed to move. But if you don't want them to move to better situations, then don't constantly slander them for not being able to succeed like another athlete who is in a better situation.
Mm-hmm. And this, again, I think another example is the whole Damian Lillard and Steph Curry conversation, where you say, okay, they're pretty comparable athletes, but one has won a lot more. Well, I mean, yeah, one had Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, while the other's best, role player or best co-partner was CJ McCollum and LaMarcus Aldridge. You can kind of understand why he has not achieved the same level of success.
Right. I think we would both agree Steph is better than Dame. That's not debatable. But the degree in terms of Steph is going to be looked at as a top 15. He's already a top 15 player of all time. He might be a top 10 player of all time when he retires. And Dame might not even be in the top 50 or the top 60 when they were in the league.
Yeah.
I don't think the difference was that vast. Steph was definitely better. But it's the difference between LeBron and KD. LeBron's definitely better than KD, but it is not that far.
Yeah,
KD
it's not like you're
close.
comparing, the way it's talked about is you're comparing Steph to some person who's made All-Star once. It's it'd be like comparing Steph to Kyle Lowry, someone who's made All-Star games but was clearly never a top, 3 to 5 point guard in the league at any point in his career. Where Damian Lillard, I would say he was multiple times.
I'd say he is 100% right now.
Definitely.
So let's get back to the draft, right? That's what happened this weekend, and that's what a lot of people are interested in talking about. I mean, we're going to get to the quarterbacks and talking about the draft. I know a lot of people want to hear us talk about Trey Lance. We did talk about Trey Lance with Akash right after, but I want to talk about what our favorite picks in this draft was. And I'm going to start off with you and ask you, what was your favorite pick in this draft? In terms of, it could be value, it could be a guy going to a situation, it could just be a really good player you thought that was drafted at a really good spot to a good team. What was your favorite pick?
Yeah, so there's a lot, obviously, over 100, 200 picks. A couple honorable mentions. Amari Rodgers to the Packers. We finally did it. Packers drafted a receiver again. Thank goodness. Another one, I thought Darisaw to the Vikings in the 20s. He was looked at as the third best tackle, and they traded back and still got him. I thought that was cool. Penei Sewell to the Lions at 7. That was awesome. But I didn't want to talk about these. A lot of people, you've heard about these. But Terrace Marshall, 59 to the Panthers. I thought this was awesome for them in the sense that when you look at their offense, McCaffrey, insane. I think he's the best running back in the league. DJ Moore is the gadget guy, yards after catch. He's going to break tackles. He's going to, make something out of nothing. And then Robbie Anderson's your burner. Terrace Marshall's the third receiver on their team right now, and he can go over the middle. He can play pretty much any position. Strong, fast. Dealt with some pretty bad quarterbacks this past year, but in 2019, you saw what he did as third fiddle to Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. He's not unfamiliar to the role. And I think he's just an awesome target for Darnold and what the Panthers are looking to do. I think that was just an awesome pick. And they got him at 59. Most people saw him maybe as a first rounder. Me and you mocked him in the first round.
Yeah.
At minimum, a top 40 to 45 guy is what I thought. I kind of wanted the Packers to get him, but they didn't. But, man, the Panthers, that was an awesome pick.
Yeah, I mean, you look at some of the guys that went in front of him. Like, I like Elijah Moore. He's got a little Antonio Brown to him, this jittery, fast, super explosive, and quick slot guy. I don't think he's better than Terrace Marshall. I actually like Terrace Marshall more than even Rashad Bateman. Like, I was praying that the Ravens took Terrace Marshall. So I thought that was really a great pick for the Panthers. Again, you mentioned it. He plays all three receiver spots. He's got good hands. He goes over the middle of the field. He's a very smooth route runner. He gets open. He's okay after the catch. It's nothing like amazing, but it's fine. And it just keeps coming down to the fact, and Pinor just mentioned in the comments, Sam Darnold, really, there's no excuses. They have a solid offensive line. Taylor Moton is one of the best right tackles in the NFL, and it's an okay offensive line. They have three very good receivers, in my opinion. When you go DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Terrace Marshall, you throw in Christian McCaffrey, who you and I agree, best running back in the NFL. Like, Sam Darnold has gone to basically quarterback heaven. And if he's unable to produce with Joe Brady in this offense, I think there'll be questions. But I agree with you. Terrace Marshall was one of the best values and players to a spot in the draft. Because I think if you look at Joe Brady, right, who coached Terrace Marshall in LSU. So it's a perfect fit. He knows the offense. It's going to be seamless, I think.
Mm-hmm. And Vish, who did you have as a pick? Maybe you throw in an honorable mention or two, but who did you think was a great value pick or pick that you really enjoyed?
So in terms of value, right, I think there were a lot of great picks. Like Kellen Mond in the third round, I thought to the Vikings was decent value because I thought he was a second round pick, but I thought Michael Carter to the Jets was an incredible fit because I thought he's an awesome fit for their scheme in the fourth round. And then he's just a really, really good running back. So I like that. I liked the guard that the Niners took a lot, actually. I hadn't watched a minute of him, but I watched him after the Niners took him. And I thought Aaron Banks is an incredible fit. I actually thought he was the best pick of the Niners draft. I mean, everybody wants to say Trey Lance, and it's super exciting and super awesome. But in terms of the player, the fit, and everything, I thought Aaron Banks was incredible. But for me, the best pick of the draft, and it goes to a guy that I think has been doing an incredible job as the GM and hasn't been talked about, and that's Andrew Berry. Since he's taken over, the Browns just continue to make shrewd moves. He's like a Tom Telesco, where he just keeps drafting really good players at spots where it looks like they're being undervalued. And I loved Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah to the Browns. I thought he was the best linebacker in this draft. He's everything you want. He's a little light. I think that the reason he fell is because people were a little worried that he's the Isaiah Simmons type where you don't really know his position. Is he a safety? Is he a linebacker? I think he's the perfect weak side linebacker. Joe Woods comes from the 49ers, and he runs that 4-3 Seattle front, and they play a lot of split safety, quarters coverage, a lot of some two-man, some cover three. And I think when you look at their defense, they just got John Johnson, Grant Delpit's coming back. So I think those two guys will be the two safeties. Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome, Greedy Williams, there's talent at corner. So they just need a run and hit linebacker, and that's who this guy is. I think this guy is going to be their will linebacker. And if you want a guy that's fast, great in coverage, hits, I think the comparison is the Jaguars, who, again, similar front Seattle scheme. They had Telvin Smith, who was about 218 pounds. Owusu-Koramoah is like 216 pounds. I think that's kind of the comparison. And I thought that was one of the best picks in the draft because I thought he was a surefire first-round pick. Not only that, I thought he was a top 20 pick.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, you look at mock drafts and they're all like, he'd go to the Browns in the first round, or he'd go, even before that in the first round. And you're thinking, okay, end of first round, he's not gone. Surely someone's going to trade up for this guy, or he's going to be one of the first 5 picked in the second. But no, he kept going down. Browns did get him. And also, this was one of their biggest needs. I mean, when you look at their defense, when you look at their offense, they don't really have any glaring holes. I think you could maybe say receiver, but they drafted one and Odell's coming back, so I wouldn't say there. Defensively, they picked up a ton of guys in the secondary, so I don't see an issue there. They're getting other guys back from injury. D-line, I'm still a little hesitant. I'm not the biggest Clowney guy, but, Myles Garrett is a one-man wrecking crew. And really their biggest thing was that they were starting Simona Takitaki and BJ Goodson at linebacker, who I don't think are the most quality middle linebackers or linebackers in the league. So being able to get a guy who me and you both had as a first rounder for sure, super rangy, can cover the slot, and is really like the modern day NFL linebacker that teams are looking for. Yeah, getting him in the second round is just insanely good value. And I think he's going to slot in really well to the Browns organization.
Right, and now you basically change your linebackers where you have Anthony Walker Jr. and now Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I think it's a lot better. I think I said this. I think we had Jason Aponte on. I said my prediction is that I think the Cleveland Browns are going to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl, and they just continue to make me feel that way. Like they have top to bottom the best roster. I think Baker is more than capable of playing the same way Jimmy G played for the Niners to make the Super Bowl in 19, the same way Goff played in the Super Bowl for the Rams to make the Super Bowl in 18. I think Baker's more than capable of that. And I think the Browns have a really good shot at representing the AFC in the Super Bowl. There's no doubt. Their offensive line is only going to get better. And it was already incredible last year. Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, we know what they bring. Odell Beckham coming back is going to add explosion to their offense. Landry's good. Baker looked great at the end of last year. And then you look at their defense, which was not that good, and it got a lot better, except for obviously the defensive line, which both of us agreed on. I'm so excited to see what the Browns are doing.
And I think the biggest thing, too, is they have Stefanski now, who – by all accounts, is eons better than the coaching of Hugh Jackson and Freddie Kitchens. So, man, like you can't really ask for much more from a team building standpoint as to what they have. So we'll see what they can do. I'm excited to see them this year with, I think they've been one of the teams over the past few years that looks really good on paper. The last year they actually produced what was on paper and then, got even better. So good for you, Browns fans, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know how you're going to be 4 or 5 years from now, because that's going to depend on how much money you pay Baker Mayfield. But right now, this next year, you're going to be incredible. So let's get to what we're here for. We're here to rank the start landing spots for the 2021 first round quarterbacks. So there were 5 that went in the first round, right? Trevor Lawrence went 1, Zach Wilson went 2, Trey Lance went 3, Justin Fields went 11, and Mac Jones went 15. So what we're going to do is we're going to rank their surrounding situation. So we've done rankings and talked about the individual players, what we thought of them coming out of college, but now it's a different game. I think their situation is going to have a lot to do with how they succeed. I think Trevor Lawrence is probably the only one I would say definitively is going to succeed in any situation, and that situation is Jacksonville. So let's rank the supporting cast. I think they all actually went to reasonable situations, some way better than others. So Blake, who do you think has the worst supporting cast and surrounding roster of these 5 guys?
So good question. I'm going to preface this by saying I have it into 3 tiers. I think there's 1 team in the tier 1, 1 team in tier 2, and then 3 in the tier 3. So the tier 3 for me is starting with the 5th, and that's the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, you can have them 4 or 3. I could honestly understand that, but my thing is this, Urban Meyer has not coached any in the NFL. He's had to stop coaching because of health issues. And that worries me. It really does, because the NFL, especially being a head coach, is one of the most demanding jobs. I mean, you're working tons of hours, you're nonstop grinding during the season. You're spending a lot of time away from family. And I'm definitely worried about his health. Also not having coached in the NFL. So that worries me. Also, their O-line is okay. I don't think it's anything special, anything great. They did draft a guy, I believe in the 2nd round. So that helps, but it's nothing like, the Packers or the Browns. It's not that great. And then their weapons are pretty good. I'll say that. I like their running backs a lot. They have one of the best 1-2 punches, James Robinson. They drafted Travis Etienne. I wasn't a huge fan of the pick, but he is a really good running back, especially as a second number 2 guy to James Robinson. So that's awesome. And then the receivers, DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault. Those are 2 pretty good guys. Tight end, they don't really have much there, which is a concern. But overall, I do think they're in a reasonable situation. And it's not to say that, they're 5th in their garbage. No, that's not it at all. But I do have some concerns with Urban Meyer and then some of their O-line and tight ends. But what do you got at 5-ish?
So I'm actually going a different route. I'll give my opinions on the Jaguars supporting cast because I feel like I have a more positive take on their supporting cast than you. But I agree with your tiers, actually. I think there's one team that's definitively better than the other 3. And then I would say there's 3 teams in tier 2, and then there's 1 team in tier 3. And I think by far, to me, the worst landing spot was Justin Fields to the Chicago Bears. And at first, it starts off with the organization, right? The Chicago Bears have a horrible history with quarterbacks. Quarterbacks just don't succeed there. I mean, I'm going to say that I wouldn't be surprised if Mitchell Trubisky comes out of his 1 year in Buffalo and has a small second act to his career and people go, wow. Like, I'm not saying Trubisky is good, but he wasn't as bad as he looked with the Bears. Quarterbacks just don't succeed there. 2, he went to a place where the coach and the GM are on their final year of their contract. What does that mean? There's a good chance both Nagy and Pace are gone next year, which means Justin Fields is going to have immediately a change in coaching, which we've seen with quarterbacks. Consistency when it comes to head coach and GM helps them a lot, especially early in their career. 3, in terms of surrounding talent, I agree the receivers aren't as bad as I think people think. We both agree Allen Robinson's very good. And then I think I'm high on Darnell Mooney. I think he showed a lot of potential, and I think he's going to look good with Justin Fields. So I'm high on that. But in terms of tight ends, Cole Kmet, they drafted high. Jimmy Graham, I don't know what you can ask from that.
That's
right. He's okay in the red zone. But in terms of their offensive line, I don't think it's very good. In terms of their defense, Roquan Smith, beast. Khalil Mack, beast. Akeem Hicks, I think he's starting to get older. Danny Trevathan, I don't think he's that guy anymore. And in terms of Sean Desai is an absolute question mark. I'm cheering for him, though. Absolutely, I'm cheering for him.
Yes.
But in terms of their corners, I don't think they've addressed anything on the other side of Jalen Johnson. Tevin Jenkins was a solid pick, but they need more on their offensive line than just Tevin Jenkins. And I just don't believe in Matt Nagy, the play caller. For me, this is who Matt Nagy is. Matt Nagy is Dolphins' Adam Gase. He's Adam Gase before people recognize that he's actually a problem, right? Nobody gave Ryan Tannehill the excuse of Adam Gase. They said Adam Gase is this great offensive mind. Remember when he was hired by the Jets, people were like, he's going to fix Sam Darnold. He's brilliant, blah, blah, blah. What happened? That's who Matt Nagy is to me. Right, that's who Matt Nagy is. Their offense, it doesn't make sense to me. They had a nice little thing going, especially David Montgomery finally showed what they were so high on him, and he finally showed something at the end of last year because they ran this kind of McVay, Shanahan-style offense. And what does Nagy do? He immediately seizes the play calling again, and they're just going to be RPO, trick play, without kind of an approach or a game. Like the way their offense attacks defenses just never makes sense to me. It's just a couple of trick plays here, but what's your sustained bread and butter? Can you run the football? Not really that well. Is the RPO kind of your sustained success? I don't know what their offense really does extremely well under Matt Nagy to say that this is it. So for me, I feel bad. Everybody knows here how much I love Justin Fields before the draft. It's unfortunate that he went to the Bears. Maybe I'm a little biased here because I'm not the most pro Bears, but I think that's by far the worst landing spot.
Interesting. So yeah, I guess that transitions well for me because I had them 4th. And I think, there is an argument to be made. You could have them last, but here's, I guess, my more positive take on it. Sure, their O-line is not the best, but they had a ton of injuries. They drafted Tevin Jenkins, and they're getting those guys back from injuries. Okay, so their O-line is going to be better than last year. Their weapons are actually not bad. I understand the thing with the tight ends. Like, okay, Jimmy Graham's not good for what he's paid, and, they took Cole Kmet in the 2nd round, but you could find teams with a lot worse tight ends, a la the Patriots last year, the Jags right now. I think their tight ends are all right. Receivers, I really do like them a lot. I like Allen Robinson. I think he's really good. And this is the best quarterback he's ever going to be able to play with. He played with Hackenberg, Blake Bortles, Trubisky. He has had a rough go with quarterbacks. So having him with Fields is exciting to see. Darnell Mooney was really good last year. He quarterback play slowed him down is what I think. And then Anthony Miller is still a decent number 3, nothing crazy, but the running back situation's not bad either. David Montgomery's a pretty solid running back if he gets a lot of carries, and Tariq Cohen's, your typical receiving back who's decent. So when I think of that, I'm like, okay, like that's actually a pretty decent supporting cast. Maybe the O-line could be better. Maybe they could have another good receiver, but it could be worse. My issue with them is, like you mentioned, the coaching and the GM, you don't know if they're going to be there. You really just don't. And this, having Nagy and Pace trade some future assets to go get a guy when they could be gone next year and not have to, see the loss of those picks
it's irresponsible.
It's kind of bad. You don't want a guy who's on the hot seat to just be trading away future capital like they did. And I think it was a great trade for them to get a guy at Fields at 11. But the fact remains that having someone who might not be there in a year deal with your future picks is kind of concerning. And like you mentioned,
Agreed.
The defense, I really don't think their defense upgraded much from the draft. They went pretty heavy O-line, and they didn't have a lot of picks. They didn't go heavy. They went heavy on offense. They lost Kyle Fuller. Akeem Hicks is 32 and has had injuries. Khalil Mack is 30. When one of those guys starts slowing down, I don't think their defense is crazy, crazy talented. I like Roquan Smith a lot, but as you mentioned, Danny Trevathan might not be what he was a few years ago. Eddie Jackson's a good safety, but cornerback leaves something to be desired, with Jalen Johnson being kind of the only cornerback that really, really is a good guy. They got rid of Buster Skrine too, who played a lot for them. Fuller's obviously gone. So I'm concerned about their defense. I still think it'll be a pretty good unit, but being able to be like a top 10, top 8 unit, that's where I think probably not. And that's what they need to win.
So they invested right in their offensive line. I'll just touch on them more. They spent 2 picks on their offensive line, 2 tackles. Tevin Jenkins is the name everybody knows. And then they also took Larry Borum from Missouri, right? So he's got a ton of talent. I think the bottom line is that when you look at 2 rookie tackles, tackle is a position that unless you draft Orlando Pace or Walter Jones or Jonathan Ogden or Trent Williams, it takes a little while to translate. I think Sewell is probably the only guy, in my opinion, in this draft that from day one is just going to dominate. Tristan Wirfs was also a freak, and he was able to do that. Joe Thomas, players like that. But I don't look at either Tevin. I think Tevin Jenkins and Borum will have growing pains. And so that's where I just don't look at anything reliable in their offense for Justin Fields. And their defense, to me, still remains like, in theory, their defense has been phenomenal the last 3-4 years. I think it's going to start to slow down. We saw how much they struggled with Akeem Hicks not playing, and I don't think you can rely on Akeem Hicks to just be that guy, top to bottom, that he once was. Because, 2 years ago, Akeem Hicks was one of the best 5 techniques in football. He was just dominant. But can he be that still? That's where. So going to my number 4, I'm actually going to – this to me was the tightest question, number 4. It was between 2 teams, and I'm going to go with Jacksonville. I was considering the Jets earlier today when we considered doing this topic, and then I went with Jacksonville. And the reason I went with Jacksonville is because I'm really high on a lot of things on their team. The problem is that a lot of it's unknown. I think DJ Chark can absolutely be a number 1 receiver in the NFL. We haven't seen DJ Chark with a big-time quarterback like Trevor Lawrence and see him be a number 1 receiver. So that's a question mark to me. I think their offensive line isn't bad. They franchise tagged Cam Robinson, who's been a solid tackle. Juwan Taylor from Florida, who they took a couple years ago, is also a solid tackle. So there's not that bad there. Laviska Shenault, Marvin Jones, to me, that's a solid receiving core with DJ Chark. And James Robinson, Carlos Hyde, and Travis Etienne is a solid running back. So it's not bad. I just don't know what their offense is going to look like when you add in Darrell Bevell, Brian Schottenheimer, and Urban Meyer. I have no clue what that's going to project like. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence is special, so it could all look great, but we don't know if it's going to be a good offense because we don't know how the offense is really going to look because they're all a little different in terms of what they've done. The big reason I have them above the Bears is I'm really high on what their defense could be. And in terms of what their defense could be, I think it's exciting. I mean, I like Josh Allen. he had 10 sacks his rookie season. I think that he's going to rear back into form. I was a big Kayvon Chason fan. He struggled as a rookie, but I still am huge on the upside. He's only 21 years old. CJ Henderson's a big time talent. I think he can be a legit number one corner. They drafted one more corner. I'm blanking. They drafted a very good player. Did they draft Tyson Campbell? Yeah, they drafted Tyson Campbell, who I was really high on, and they signed Shaq Griffin, so there's talent in their secondary. Andre Sisco, I thought, is a good player, but him coming off his ACL, that's a question mark. And then Miles Jack is one of the best linebackers in the NFL. So that's the one known on their defense. I think that Jacksonville has a lot of really young, talented players in a lot of premium positions. And then you add in Trevor Lawrence. I think there's an opportunity for them to be a playoff team next year because of Trevor Lawrence and all of that. But we'll have to see.
Yeah, they're definitely. Yeah, I was maybe a little more down on them mainly due to the Urban Meyer situation, but it's kind of the same story with the Jags. Is there are a lot of unknowns, but one thing we do know is they have a quarterback who's special.
Right.
And that can solve a lot of these issues.
Right. And I think where we stand is I'm looking at the Jags and saying, oh, look at what all these players could be because they were so good coming out and they're so young. And you're looking at them and saying this is what they are right now. And I'm not sure if that's enough for Trevor Lawrence.
Exactly. Okay. So I think I can move on to my number 3. And that's going to be the New York Jets. I'm higher on them than the Jags and the Bears, like by a decent amount, but not enough to put them into my tier 2 with the other teams. So I've been hearing this. I know you've been hearing this too. It's been in the media. Sam Darnold wasn't the issue. Look what he's been working with. And it's a fair point. You know, they had Gase, didn't have a great O-line. Receivers not there. Running back's not the best. I agree. Totally right. Now they have Saleh, they have LaFleur. We haven't seen them as head coaches, or offense coordinators, but I think they have potential. I like Saleh a lot as a guy. I think he's one of those people that is a great leader, and sometimes that's better than being insanely smart with X's and O's. So I like that. LaFleur's system, he's got like his brother, McVay and Shanahan, he runs that same similar style offense. And I think Zach Wilson will slot into that perfectly. I really do. I think you couldn't ask for a much better scheme fit than that. And then just talking about their roster, receivers, well, they weren't that great last year. Well, what'd they do? Well, they went out and they got Elijah Moore. They went out and they got Corey Davis. They have Jamison Crowder. They have Denzel Mims. Running back, that was a question mark. They drafted Michael Carter, who I think will fit into the scheme and this team insanely well, uber talented. O-line, they said, all right, we don't have the best O-line. Traded up for Elijah Vera Tucker. Awesome pick. Mekhi Becton is an insanely talented tackle. So I like that. Defense-wise, tons of just holes on the roster in general with that. But their D-line's actually pretty solid. Quinnen Williams is awesome. CJ Mosley's coming back.
Carl Lawson's a beast.
Yeah, I forgot. They signed him as well. And then the safety May, pretty solid. Overall, I just think their offense is a lot more talented than people are giving them credit for. And I trust LaFleur and Saleh maybe more than others do. So I really do think they'll actually be a pretty solid landing spot for Zach Wilson.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I have the Jets number 3 as well. I would have, if before the draft, I would have had them as 4 or 5. But you look at number 3. I mean, first of all, Zach Wilson to me is more talented than Sam Darnold. I don't know why Jets fans are so attached to Sam Darnold. Zach Wilson's just more talented, and he's a perfect fit, like you said, to the wide zone offense. He's good in the quick game. He can run RPOs. He played in a wide zone-based offense from the pistol at BYU. They ran a lot of crossing route concepts, which his brother runs a lot of with the Green Bay Packers. So he's a perfect fit from that standpoint for Mike LaFleur's offense. And the difference between them and the Jags is that we know exactly what Mike LaFleur's offense is going to look like. It's going to look like a variation of what his brother and Shanahan are running. So that's a perfect fit. Then you brought up Michael Carter, right? Perfect running back for the system. He's going to be incredible. They got Tevin Coleman, who's a terrific pass protector, and he doesn't fumble. So that's at least a positive. He's no longer an explosive runner. You talked about the receivers. Corey Davis, baller. We both wanted him to go to the Jets in terms of scheme fit, everything, perfect fit. Elijah Moore, awesome. Awesome pick for them. Jamison Crowder, you and I both think he's a lot better than he's been given credit for. So
besides
he's
injuries,
good. And right, he's going to be a good player. Denzel Mims has insane talent. I mean, you're talking 6'2", 215, 4'3" speed. He's like Roy Williams from Texas, but we'll see if he realizes that talent, the potential. He was on the way last year. And then the defense, yeah, there's question marks. I wish they invested in their secondary more. I mean, again, their offensive line, you mentioned, it's going to be better. Vera Tucker, great pick. Becton, already great player. So the defense, I wish they invested earlier in their secondary, especially their corners. But we know this is going to be primarily a defense that's going to play zone, a lot of quarters coverage, a lot of cover three. So their corners don't have to be the greatest. They just have to be competent in playing in zone coverage. Their defensive line, Quinnen Williams, just a beast, an absolute monster, terrific player. Carl Lawson, very good. I think their defense is going to be better, especially next year with Robert Saleh. And you look at the whole picture, yeah, it's a really young, talented team. They might not be perfect around Zach Wilson this year, but they're building for something that could be really good around Zach Wilson, who has a ton of talent over the next few years.
And I think they learned from the Darnold mistake of maybe not having the most talented weapons, maybe not having the best O-line with what they had last year. And they said, we are going to make sure our quarterback is in the best position possible to succeed before we, invest heavily in our defense, which, over the past few years, they really have drafted heavy. Defensively, you think of Quinnen Williams, Leonard Williams going early. There's a couple guys there, but they've got a lot of offensive talent in this draft. You think of 4 picks, I guess 3 picks surrounding Wilson and Tucker, Elijah Moore, Carter Williams. Like, those are all who I think to be good guys and will fit well in the system. And then they signed other guys too. So they're doing their best to make sure that if Zach Wilson's a good quarterback, he can show his talents.
Absolutely. And just real quick, before we go to number 2 and number 1, let's just recap the rankings. So I have the Bears 5, the Jaguars 4, the Jets 3. Blake has the Jaguars 5, the Bears 4, and the Jets 3. So now let's get into it. Blake, I'm pretty sure I know where you're going with number 2. I'm pretty sure our number 2 and number 1 is the same, but who is the number 2 landing spot?
Yeah, so this is my tier 2 team. I think they're a notch above the tier 3 teams in a sense that just the organizational structure and sliding into that team is probably easier just because of the sustained success. And that's going to be Mac Jones to the Patriots. Insane. They have a really good O-line. They have, I think, to be a really good running game overall with McDaniels. Damian Harris. I'm blanking on the other running backs. They still have Sony Michel, I believe, but Damian Harris is really the guy who I think is special. And they signed 2 tight ends, Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith. They didn't have good tight ends last year. Now they have 2 pretty above average ones, I'd say. Receivers is where I'm like, okay, they don't have really much there still. But the fact that they can run the ball so well is what leads me to believe they're going to be special. And then I think, okay, they have Bill Belichick. They have Josh McDaniels. That's probably the best head coach, offensive coordinator combo maybe in the league, you could argue. I wouldn't take anyone over Bill as a head coach. So they have that. And then just the Patriots organization is obviously, run by the Kraft family and has been pretty good for the last 20 years. So I'll have them as my number 2. You can touch more on the defense if you want, Vish. I think you have them as your number 2 as well.
Yeah, I do, and I wanted to touch on their defense. That's primarily why they're number 2 for me. Their defense is going to be really good. The one thing they were missing on their defense was size on their defensive line. Well, boom, Christian Barmore just falls to them at pick 38. It's convenient how that happens, huh? Mac Jones is a perfect fit for what they do offensively. Josh McDaniels is obviously really creative. We know they're going to be able to run the football. We saw how good their run game was at the end of last year with Cam Newton. And, I don't know if Mac Jones will start next year because I still believe in Cam Newton. Maybe I'm crazy, but I still believe in Cam Newton, but we'll see. But in terms of the run game, we know with Damian Harris, it's going to be good. I think the receivers, Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne, are fine, but I think their tight ends with Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry are really good. And I think that makes a big difference because we know how creative Josh McDaniels is in getting into heavy personnel, getting base defense on the field, and then finding matchups he wants to exploit. So I think we're going to see a little more of that. But yeah, from the standpoint of the Patriots in terms of what they provide for Mac Jones, coach coaching is as good as it gets. Offensive weapons, I would say the tight ends are great. The running back is good. The offensive line is very good, and the receivers are solid, but not the best. That would be the only spot. And then they have a really good defense. So I think that in terms of fit, like Mac Jones is going to a really, really great spot because the Patriots have kind of very underratedly built this thing back up where they can make a run over the next 2 years at a Super Bowl.
Yeah, definitely. And well, they have Mac Jones for cheap for at least 4 years, maybe 5 if they take his 5th-year option. So the window's back open for the Patriots. I'm a little bummed out at seeing that. It's nice seeing some new teams, but they don't have Tom anymore, so that's always a little nice knowing. But we'll see how Mac Jones turns out. Good situation. Now, Vish, who do you have as your number 1 landing spot?
Yeah, this is a no-brainer. This is the Niners. And I jokingly tweeted out after the draft like crap. I liked Justin Fields and Mac Jones. I had them ranked above Trey Lance solely because I was so scared of some things with Trey Lance. Obviously, Lance might be the most talented of them all, but there were some things that scared me. But now I'm just going to look like an idiot because Lance is going to by far a better situation. And it looks like I think Lance really can succeed. I mean, you just look at the mental makeup and all of that. He just looks like a guy that's going to succeed also in that situation. So like, I was like, man, I'm going to look really, really stupid over the next 10 years. Yeah. But that's okay because if Trey Lance is winning on the Niners, I don't mind being the biggest idiot out there. So that's okay with me. But yeah, it's 100% the Niners. The Niners offensive line was maybe their only thing that isn't above average. And it's now above average. I told you, Aaron Banks, I love that pick for the Niners in terms of fit into the wide zone, in terms of size, in terms of run pass blocking, just exactly what they need. Hopefully he can slot right there in at right guard. McGlinchey, I know a lot of people dislike McGlinchey and because McGlinchey has a lot of bad moments in pass protection, but McGlinchey is still fine, and he's a very good run blocker, and so there's some things he does well. Trent Williams, obviously the best left tackle in the NFL. I think Alex Mack is going to help them a lot, so you have a good offensive line there. Brandon Ayuk, we know how special he is. Deebo Samuel, very special. George Kittle, arguably the best tight end in the NFL. Now you add Trey Sermon to the run game. You add Kyle Juszczyk. You add Trey Lance to the run game. So they have this outstanding offense. And then you go to the defense. You go Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Jimmy Ward. Maybe you get something out of D Ford, Samson Ebukam, Javon Kinlaw. It is just a loaded defense. Jason Verrett. So there's a ton on this team where it's like it's set up for a quarterback to succeed. And we see Jimmy Garoppolo when he plays, he succeeds. And now you add a more talented player in Trey Lance. I see no way Lance isn't going to succeed. And this is by far the best landing spot for any of these quarterbacks. And I would say it might be the best single landing spot we've ever seen for a quarterback. When you add in Kyle Shanahan, who we haven't even talked about, who makes the game so easy for his quarterbacks, I don't think we've seen a guy get picked in the top 5 that goes to a spot like this. This is unprecedented, in my opinion.
I'm totally with you. And they got the 12th pick mainly due to injuries. I think a lot of people thought that had their roster remained healthy, they would be a playoff team again. I was one of those people. Clearly that didn't happen. They had an insanely long list of people with IR, COVID, or just other injuries. And like you mentioned, I would compare their pass. I would take their pass catchers and running back situation and compare it to any of these other landing spots for any of the other teams and say, I'd rather have these guys. And then I think, okay, what offensive mind would I want to have the most? Well, McDaniels is pretty good, but Kyle Shanahan's kind of in a league of his own compared to the other guys. So yeah, I would take him too. Their defense, still a few question marks maybe with the secondary, but overall it's a solid defense. And then you mentioned the O-line too. Williams is back. I don't think he's the best tackle in the league, although I do think he's a very good one. And then they signed Alex Mack. They drafted a guard who, as you mentioned, he looks like a beast, and he's from Notre Dame. And you know if he's from Notre Dame, he's probably going to end up being good if he's a guard. Only kidding there, but yeah, they clearly are heavily invested in the O-line, which I always love. And their pass catchers are great. Maybe the Trey Sermon pick wasn't what I thought they should have done, but Trey Sermon, Mostert, Jeff Wilson Jr., that's a good stable of running backs because Shanahan likes a different one every week, it seems like. I think they are loaded compared to these other teams.
Right. In my opinion, the only quibble you can have with the Trey Sermon pick is that you didn't like that they traded up for a running back in round 3 when you felt that they should have traded up for a corner. But the player itself, right? We saw Trey Sermon last year for Ohio State. He is a beast. He is a beast. And I think he brings a little bit of what the Niners need, a down in and down out bruiser. I think they're going to be, I mean, you throw in the guard, you throw in Trey Sermon, you throw in Trey Lance, how physically imposing he is. The Niners are going to be very physical next year. And then they have a physical defensive line with Javon Kinlaw and DJ Jones and Eric Armstead and Nick Bosa. It is physical. They're going to be a really physical football team on both lines of scrimmage. And yeah, there's no better situation. I mean, when you have an all-pro tight end, a receiver with mega potential in Brandon Ayuk, a receiver in Deebo Samuel who we've seen single-handedly win games. We saw it last year versus the Rams. You just get him the ball and he carries 5 people and wins you the game. You throw in Kyle Shanahan's play calling. You throw in a Hall of Fame left tackle in Trent Williams. You have Nick Bosa, who's a top 3 edge player in the NFL. Fred Warner, who's a top 2 middle linebacker in the NFL. You throw in all of this, like there's too much not to succeed. And that's why Trey Lance by far is in the best situation. I think we agree on that.
Yeah, definitely. And then there was one question I wanted to get to. So Anthony Kravis, I apologize for not pronouncing your name correctly. Not sure, but so the Bears are 28-20 with Foles and Trubisky since Nagy came. How are the Jets higher than them? Vish, do you want to go first?
Yeah, because you have to project. I mean, Nagy has had a good record with the Bears. I would argue a lot of the first season had to do with the fact that Vic Fangio was killing it for them. But he was successful. I do have question marks. I don't think his offense is that good. I don't think his offense does that much for the quarterback. So from that standpoint, I do have question marks with him. He's been there for 3 years, right? 28 and 22. That's 3 years, right? Adam Gase was about 23 in 23, his first 3 years in Miami in a tougher division. So maybe not a tougher division, but I still think there's a little bit of a comparison. Maybe Nagy's better. I mean, we know how bad Gase is. In terms of my problem is mostly the fact that the Bears, what if Nagy's gone next year? What if Pace is gone next year? So Justin Fields needs a new coach and a new GM. And what if that new coach and GM don't love Justin Fields? They love quarterback B in the draft, the way the Cardinals and Cliff Kingsbury loved Kyler Murray over Josh Rosen. So for those reasons, when you have a coach and a GM who might not be in a job next year and all of that, I just think that it's a really tough spot for any rookie quarterback to go to because Justin Fields has the most pressure on him from day one. Trevor Lawrence is probably second because of all the hype surrounding Trevor Lawrence the last 5-6 years. But Justin Fields, right, if Andy Dalton isn't good, Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace's jobs are riding on the fact that Justin Fields has to be a star. So there's a ton of pressure on him to win and win now.
And I think you mentioned it too with 2018, their offense was really not that insanely good. They scored 10 points in the playoff game. They were 21st in yards. It was mainly because their defense was so dominant that they were winning games. They weren't winning games because Trubisky was going out and killing teams and they were getting in shootouts. Not really. It was more their defense just clamping people down, forcing turnovers, and stuff of that nature. And their defense is nowhere close to that, what they were a few years ago. I don't think it is even remotely. There's a few of the same guys, but A, they're all older, and B, the pieces around them have just been, one by one just leaving. Adrian Amos, Kyle Fuller, no longer there. Some of those D linemen, I believe Eddie Goldman's coming back, but
he's going to help a lot.
He will actually help, yes, a ton. But I think with Hicks and Mack being older, especially Hicks, he's 32. He has had injuries in the past, and when he gets injured, it's like their run defense just completely falls off a cliff. It's like night and day between that. So I think that's part of the reason. And also you got to think along the lines of the fact that they really have not shown much against the best of the best teams when they have gotten to the playoffs. I mean, the Saints game you can point to, okay, well, Wims dropped a pass and stuff, but the game was not really that close at all.
Let me ask you this. what do they do well on offense? They were not a good offense last year, and then Matt Nagy gave up the play calling, and they ran this kind of bootleg version of the 49ers and Rams offense where they ran a little bit of wide zone with David Montgomery. They moved the pocket and gave Mitchell Trubisky half-field reads, and he did all of those things well. Well, Matt Nagy is the play caller again. What does Matt Nagy do well? Throw the ball behind the line of scrimmage to Tyreek Cohen? I'm being reductionist here, but what does he do well as an offensive coordinator? Their run game isn't overly creative with him. They don't run the football particularly well. Their pass game isn't really, he didn't build a pass game suited to Mitchell Trubisky. So what does he do well? And that's where I look at the situation for Justin Fields. And it's like, if you don't have a play caller that's doing all these things for the quarterback, then the quarterback is going to obviously struggle. The rest of these at least the two teams at the top, Josh McDaniels and Kyle Shanahan, you can have confidence that the play caller is going to be maximizing the quarterback.
Yeah, I'm with you. And yeah, just again to reiterate that point is 28-20 was in the past with rosters that I would argue, at least offensively, way, way better. Offense has probably been comparable since they got Robinson, maybe even worse. So yeah, I'd have the Jets, and we didn't even touch on that part of it too, but they have a lot of new talent, and I'd say probably better offensive talent around the quarterback.
Yeah, I would too. I would too. Outside of Allen Robinson, I would take Corey Davis, Jamison Crowder, over, and maybe even Denzel Mims over any of the Bears' weapons. I really would.
Maybe running back, you could say the Bears is definitely better than Michael Carter.
But Jets have a better O-line. Between Becton, Vera Tucker, that's better than what the Bears are going to trot out, even when you add in Tevin Jenkins. So, yeah, 100%.
But, yeah, good question, though.
Yeah, and so, guys, that kind of wraps it up. We gave you our rankings of these landing spots. We talked about Aaron Rodgers. Thank you guys for joining us. Super fun. I don't know how often we will be streaming this week. I have finals this week, so I got to be studying in and focused on that. So we'll kind of play things by ear. Keep an eye on my Twitter @Vish Kumaran. I will be tweeting out when we're streaming. I'm sure Blake will go live and do some Packers stuff. Tune in for that if you want to learn a little bit more about a different NFL team.
Coming up in the future, near future, we'll talk about them.
For sure. Thank you so much for joining us, guys, and we'll be back sometime soon.